Yeah, thanks for coming here. Bruce and I both retired within the last year or so from Philips, and one of the founders of Pioneer Biomed and Adepto worked with us when we were at Hewlett Packard. We go way back to Hewlett Packard. Anyone in here remember the old HP stuff? Oh, we got, okay, old Merlins and all that. Yeah, we go way back to that. And he goes back even further.
Thanks.
Yeah, really, because he's older. And anyway, they wanted to know if we'd be interested in doing some seminars and consulting. And we thought that might be interesting. And they offered to bring us out to their place in Kansas City. So Pioneer flew us out, not at the same time. And we were both really impressed with with how they treat their employees there and how they take care of things, and how much everyone really wants to put in what they can to do, a great job for the company. So we were impressed enough to say, yeah, we'll do this. And they said, well, you could talk about anything you want. So we weren't going to talk about networking, but we thought we'd talk about football and basketball when the people who are running this leave the room. But no, we'll talk about networking and such, and yeah, and something to help you guys with some development tips. Anything else?
Yeah, like Jim said, we both recently retired. I just retired full-time from Philips a couple months ago, and I was looking for some part-time consulting and some work on the side. I had some options, but Pioneer Biomedical by far was at the top of my list. The way they've grown the company, the way they treat their employees, it's just a pleasure to work with them, and that's why we made the decision to go work with Pioneer. But they're incorporating out with Adepto. You may have heard of Adepto. They're kind of the pump side of the business. Pioneer is kind of the patient monitoring side of the business. So we're here to represent them, but we're going to be talking mainly about industry standard type of networking commands, tips and stuff like that, Jim.
Yeah.
So.
And we're both longtime patient monitoring folks, and we know a lot about that. And how many here have Philips monitoring equipment? Quite a few. Okay, that's good. So what we're talking about is kind of generic, so it'll work really with anything. We'll be giving examples, of course, on what we know best, which of course is a Philips, but it would work with GE or Space Labs, any of that. So, okay. So, Bruce, you want to go first?
Yeah. So, been around the business a long time. Started right out of college in 1982 for a little outfit out of Palo Alto called Hewlett Packard, and they hired me in 1982 to work on their computer systems, if you can believe that. Many computer systems, HP 3000. I mean, we installed and serviced disk drives. You won't believe this, but they were 120 megabytes or 404 megabytes, the size of your wash machine. So they were huge beasts and heavy. But that's how it was back then. They were talking megabytes instead of terabytes now, stuff like that. Yeah. But worked for HP. We both worked for HP, and then went to work as a biomed for about 7 years. Got to see how that's all about. And then the last 15 years of my career, I've been with Philips as a pre-sales technical consultant. So yeah, been around. We're going to talk about a lot of real life situations here. So
yeah, and Bruce and I both have CompTIA, Network Plus, and A Plus, and Cisco. At Philips, in order to be a field engineer nowadays, you have to have Cisco CCNA. So because it used to not be that way, but they saw the writing on the wall. Everything's going networking, and so that makes a big difference. And I started back in '86, so 4 years after Bruce, with HP, and I was actually in the chemical analysis group. My background's in chemistry, but then I got taken over to the dark side to you guys in medical. And the last 20 years I've been in medical doing field support, and every day going out and working with you guys and others in the field. And then also I did, after a while, I did national support. So the field engineers, there was 5 of us covering the US, Canada, and in Puerto Rico. And the field engineers who would be working out in the field, if they had trouble, they'd call one of us. We'd work with them on the phone. If not, couldn't fix it, we could call the factory or go out on site. So I did that and then came back to the field about 2018 and continued there. And that's what I wanted to do, was be in the field working directly with Biomed. So anyway.
So who do we have in the audience here? Is anybody here from IT departments? Nobody?
No? Okay.
Biomeds?
Okay, good.
Any biomed managers?
Good.
You got one?
Okay. You need to leave, sir. We're going to be talking some stuff you're not allowed to hear about.
You may not want to hear.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just so we know who's in the audience.
Yeah, yeah. So we've been around, seen a lot, and so a lot of what we talk about is not just stuff we put in a slide deck, but it's stuff from the real world that we actually saw and worked with you guys and others every day in the field. And that's why we can talk about this with some form of authority, because we've seen it. So, okay. So we've got some practical ways to have interdepartmental communication. So first thing is make friends with IT, and that's important because, you know, it's
some grumblings there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're going to be working, if you aren't already, everybody probably is working with IT. And when there's a problem, you know, a central station goes down or a monitor won't talk to a central, and you're working with, you have to deal with IT, you want to make sure you know who you're talking to and you get the right person. There's lots of people in IT. There's a firewall group, there's a networking group, there's groups on servers and VMs and all that. And if you get the wrong person, it's not going to be helpful. So get to know IT. Learn some basic skills. It doesn't hurt. Just a lot of biomed shops are encouraging their folks to learn some skills. And a good place to start is Network Plus through CompTIA. That's kind of a generic, if it works for any network, not just Cisco or anything. So that's what we did. We started with Network Plus, and so you can do this on your own. There's places online that you can take online courses and things. So that's a good place. Practice using the commands. You can do that on your laptop, and, you know, whatever, just ping different things and use commands, just basic everyday commands, and work with IT to get an IT contact so that you can, if you have a problem, you can call someone pretty quick. Bruce, you want to take the other side?
Yeah, so if you are interested in moving to the dark side over here in IT, Jim and I both have seen some real life experiences where some guys were interested in that. And they start out in biomed, kind of move into biomed manager. You okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
And now a couple of them are actually directors of IT. So, you know, it can happen if you're interested in that. But these guys, we know, you know, now they know the biomed side, they've learned the IT side, now they're managing a whole department of IT. So if you're interested in that, it can happen. You know, it takes a lot of work, but it can happen. The main thing is these guys, you know, these groups, I know they hate each other, but you really have to work together with the modern patient monitoring networks.
Yeah, I was talking yesterday evening to someone from Stanford, and he started out in biomed and then went and got his Cisco certification, then went to IT, and he works directly now with biomed because he knows both sides. He can work on the monitors, he knows how to do that, but also knows the IT side. So that's a perfect individual because he's seen both sides of the road there.
Okay. Any questions so far?
If you have any questions, just, they need to turn that down a little. Oh, okay. Just a little left. Okay. Yeah. So if you have any questions, just speak up. We'll answer them. If we don't know the answer, if Bruce and I don't know the answer, we'll make up a really good one. Okay. There's just a few commands. It's not all inclusive because there are obviously a lot of commands in networking, but these just few commands will help you if I call you, you know, I'm working with you guys, say someone calls, when someone would call Philips, I was always willing to work with them, and whatever it took, if it's 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever, over the phone. And if you guys are willing to try the commands and we can work together, and let's say we get it going with, you know, you identified the problem of a network switch and it turned out the UPS had failed or something, and you put batteries in and everything's fine, or you plug it right into AC and you're up and going, then that solved a couple of problems. One, you got it up and going really quick, and patient monitoring can continue. And I think we built up a little trust relationship, because, you know, if I could have charged you $1,000 or $2,000 to come out there, but I didn't. I worked with you, and so you'll trust me to know that I'm going to help you. My goal is to get you up and going as fast as possible, not make money for the company. I know it doesn't sound right for the company, but that's what I wanted to do, because it just made more sense for everybody. So anyway, there are commands that help you with that. It won't change your life, but it'll help you fix your system quicker, and you don't have to take a red or blue pill. So we're not in the matrix or anything. Yeah, here's some commands. Bruce, you want to?
Yeah, we'll go through these a lot in more detail, a lot of the more common commands. The more you learn about these, the more IT will like you, and they'll be calling on you. These are just the beginning, really, but Jim and I have used these a lot over the years to help us troubleshoot problems, and we'll get into each one of these just a little bit more detail here. So,
yep. Okay. Primary on the list is to do these commands, you need a command prompt window or DOS command in the old days, for those of you that remember that. Okay. So depending on what type of system you have, turn this off for a second. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay. I'm just going to do that until we get the noise sort of fixed. But on a Windows 7 system, you click on the start button and you type a command, CMD, and there you go. On XP, there's still a lot of those around. If anyone has Pick Classic from Philips, then that still uses XP, except for the very final version, which uses Windows 7. You type run and then choose run and type CMD. On Windows 10, you would type command or CMD, and it'll bring up the command prompt. Now, the caveat is that on most central stations, I'm sure most vendors do this, you can't just do that, because lots of times the taskbar is blocked out. You don't want a taskbar in your window while you're monitoring patients. So you have to use an alternate method, whether it's to get in the configuration and go to a tools menu, or in some cases you actually have to log out and get in as a super user or administrator, because a lot of systems nowadays don't want the system to have administrator authority to do things, because in the event that some virus would get the system, it shouldn't but could, then that gives it carte blanche to do what it wants. So in some cases you'll have to try alternate methods, but you can work with the folks at the vendor. Like if you call the help desk at Philips, they can walk you through how to bring that up, or you talk to me and I'd say, okay, Fred, here's what you want to do. Go into this, click this, go here, and there you go. Anything else?
yeah, just be careful. Whoever your vendor is, if they talk you into going into maintenance mode or whatever, that may shut down the patient monitoring for that central station or the server. So just if you want to use these commands, talk to one of your people that really know the system, or just call the vendor's help desk and get you a command prompt. Or you can play around on your laptop, at home or in office, and try some of this stuff. Typically won't hurt anything.
Yeah. Okay, let's start with ping. That's the command we almost always start with, because it can identify issues many times really quick. Okay, it stands for Packet Internet Broker. First used in '83 because it mimicked sonars, when they're in submarines, pinging, to see what's going on and find out if there's other people and enemies in the area, that sort of thing. So it sends out through called an ICMP, Internet Control Message, and this is a standard networking option that's available anywhere on any network, no matter whether it's Windows or Linux or Unix, everything. Command takes the form ping and an IP address or ping and a host name. So for instance, if you ping google.com, if you're on a central station and you ping google.com and it comes back a reply, get with IT right away, because that's really not good. You don't want to be able to ping the internet from a central station, because that means someone on the outside can come in. So I had that happen. So make sure you can. But if you ping, say, the name of the server, and nowadays, most new next-gen operating systems, like Philips has the PIC-IX versus the old classic, and I think GE has something similar, Space Labs and that sort of thing. They work mostly by host names versus they can work by IP, but if you ping by host name, that not only if it comes back with a reply to the server, not only tells you that the server's responding and everything, but also that DNS, and we'll get into that in a few minutes here, the domain name system, that tells you that's working too. So pinging by host name is actually a good way to go. Question? Okay. And you can also ping host name with a -T option, and that'll just keep pinging forever. The regular ping does 4. The -T will keep going until you press a Control-C. Yeah,
yeah, go to the next slide, Jim. It's not uncommon at all. If you ping something, you know it's working. Like Jim said, you'll get 4 replies. The first time it makes that connection, it's not uncommon for the first one to fail. Yeah, then the next 3 will look good. And just try it again. You can scroll up and hit enter, or type in that same command, and I bet you then those 4 will work. So first time it fails, don't be concerned at all. It's trying to make that connection. I've seen that many times. So the ping -T can really help you with the intermittent problem, and we've seen this. Was that me? Oh, okay. Real life again, where we had problems communicating from a server to the EMR, but sometimes it worked, sometimes it wouldn't. Some of the data was there in EMR, like NBP, but it may be missing temperature or something like that. Going back and forth, and I used a ping -T from the server to the EMR, and 5 of them would work, all some of them would fail, and 10 of them would work, and 1 would fail. So we knew we had a problem, we just didn't know where. But we eventually found out that the server was hard configured for 100 full, and the switch on the IT side was set to auto. So on the Cisco switch at the time, it automatically defaulted to 100 half duplex, which is not good. And this is exactly what you'll see. You'll get some data through sometimes you won't.
It slows down the connection. We're actually going to get into duplex shortly on that, but it slows down the connection. So that's, like Bruce says, not a good thing. That's more specific to Cisco switches. I don't know if the others do that.
Yeah.
If it fails, if ping fails, you'll get request timeout. So.
Yeah, and if you run a ping and, oh my goodness, how do I stop this? Control-C, just remember Control-C, and it'll stop it. So
one thing I did, there's this long verbose command here at the bottom, and I added in because one time, one hospital, actually just before I retired, they were having a problem where at 1:22 in the morning and 2:33 in the morning and 3:17, whatever, their central stations would slow down. Some would even go offline. Some of them they click to bring up, say, calipers, and it would take a minute. And it was always happening in the middle of the night. So I did this ping command, which would ping forever, but then after so much time, or however long a size of a file, it would put the results in a file. And then it would say, keep an hour's worth of data, and then it would go to the next one. Well, I didn't want to be there at 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning to see what's going on. And I'm guessing that you folks here probably wouldn't want to do that either, right? Just a wild guess. You probably have something better to do, like sleep. Well, I came back the next day, and sure enough, I could see everything's going fine, and it was about 1:23 in the morning. I started seeing pings going from 3 milliseconds, we'd have a time, or 2 milliseconds to 1,000 or 10,000 or something. And okay, this isn't right. So the bottom line, it turned out, was that the switch that connects to their firewall, this was a hybrid system where they had a Philips network for all the central stations and bedside monitors, and then it would go through a firewall, through a switch that would connect directly to a firewall to a virtual server, which isn't a real server. It's out there, but it's on a PC with other servers. So, and that switch was a 100 megabit switch. Well, they were running, and it took Biomed and IT working together. This went on for like a year, and IT kept saying, oh, it's not us. But finally, the two working together, and I working with both of them, we figured out that the switch was 100 megabits, and it was getting overloaded to these backups and things that were running on the rest of the system at 2 in the morning. And once it gets to 100% on that CPU on the switch, everything else gets thrown away, all the way. Thrown away. And once they put in a gigabit switch instead of a megabit switch, that solved the problem. That's all the way. Of course, for the longest time, IT said, nothing's a problem here. We don't have any problems. Everything's working fine. We've double checked and triple checked. And of course, Bruce and I have heard this many times. When something like that happens in the middle of the night, we don't do anything different, and no vendor does anything different at 1 in the morning versus 1 in the afternoon. It's just the system's going and doing its thing. So anyway, doing this command actually saved the day there, because I could go back, next day and not stay there all throughout the night. So anyway. Okay.
Any questions on
that?
Yeah. Sure.
I think that's the Google DNS, right?
The Google DNS?
The 8.
Oh, yes, it is. Right. Exactly right. Yeah. And that was just, let's see, that was, I did that just to show you. Yeah, you're right. That's a Google DNS there. But, and you can actually do that. In this case, what I was doing, I substituted the 8.8 with, I think it was the the host name of the server. But yeah, you could also, obviously you wouldn't be getting a reply from a Google server. You shouldn't on your central station. It was a good catch on that.
Yeah.
I also use that as well.
Yeah. And if you're actually doing it from, like, say your work laptop in the shop or something, you probably will get a reply. But on a Philips network or GE or whatever, you shouldn't get any replies from something outside the hospital. Okay. We talked about DNS a little earlier, alluded to it. So it's an acronym for domain name system, and it works by allowing you to type in instead of the internet works by numbers. Everything works by numbers. And it's hard to remember that if you want to get to Yahoo, you just type in 192 or not 174.32. Like, who remembers that? So the domain name system was created to allow you to just type in yahoo.com, and it's kind of like a phone book. In a phone book, you look for a name, of a company or a person, and it gives you a number, phone number. And it's the same thing with DNS. You put in a name, and DNS replies back with a number, and that way you don't have to remember everything. So, and that DNS, all that information is stored in files. Hospitals usually have their own DNS internally, and so you can get around inside and outside. There's DNS servers all around the world that are automatically updated, and so if for some reason Yahoo were to change their IP address for some weird reason, whatever it might be, then they would update the DNS servers around the world. So you don't have to know that they changed; they would just do it. There are the older systems use what's called a WINS,
Windows Internet Naming Service, or you may hear net bias, that sort of thing. It's just, that was pre-DNS, like the old PIC classic systems use that, which works just fine internally. And it's like when we work on a Philips network, we really prefer, for ease of repair and support, we prefer an isolated system. You guys probably would have seen that too when you have an isolated network, Philips network or GE network, whatever. It works a whole lot better because you're able to control that yourself. IT doesn't mess with it, and so that's a good thing. And the vendor you choose will be able to troubleshoot that. Bruce and I have been in many times where we can run all sorts of commands, do whatever we want, because we know this network. In many cases, we installed the network, and so we know it better than anybody. So anyway.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You know, IT may call you in the biomed shop, you pick up the phone and they say, I just want to let you know we're changing the IP address of the DNS server here next month. And, you know, it's important to, if you're new especially, just have an idea of what a lot of this stuff is. DNS, you go, oh, I remember those two old guys at MD Expo talking about DNS. Yeah, it converts an IP address to a host name. If you're new to, you know, just understand what they're talking about. And IT people will pick up real quick if you don't know what you're talking about. So it helps just to understand the basics, a lot of this stuff. And if you're interested, dig into it deeper, try to get some of the basic certifications, or go further like we did, you know, get your CCNA, Cisco certification, all kinds of IT certifications out there that can only help you in your career and your pay scale. So DNS is still around, very important. That's all I wanted to say on that.
So. And so we've both seen problems, and Bruce mentioned that the hospital may say, oh, we're changing the DNS. One of the things we've seen is that they may put in, like, for instance, when we have a central station, bunch of central stations, and they'll put it into their system, especially if it's on the hospital network, they'll put in their systems that every central station has a host name and an IP, and they'll put that in there. And in more than one occasion, someone will fat finger those numbers and they'll put in the host name, but the IP address will be off by one digit, because instead of typing one or 10 dot something, it might be 10.11 instead of 10.10 or whatever it is, and all of a sudden it won't work. And so this NSLOOKUP command actually will help you to determine if what they have in their system, what the DNS entry is, matches what's supposed to be for every single central station and the servers. And typing, if you just type NSLOOKUP, then you can type in the name of this they're talking about, they use onlinecomputerchips.com. You can type in a host name or something, and it'll come back with some information for you that will tell you what the DNS server is, and also it'll tell you what's supposed to be the IP address of, say, that central. And if it doesn't match, generally when we would install something, we'd always put a little label on the front of every central station PC with the host name, the IP address, the subnet mask, and all that. And if it doesn't match, then there's something wrong. And that's when you can get with IT and say, hey, did y'all change anything recently in your DNS? And I've actually been able to troubleshoot that over the phone with the biomed, figure out that something didn't match. They got with IT. IT said, oh, yeah, we did do this, and we'll get that fixed. And a few seconds later, or hours, it's fixed. Anything else? Okay. I just mentioned subnet mask, and you'll hear a lot about that. And Bruce, do you want to take this one?
Well, it really has to do with, you know, again, computers are all ones and zeros, but when you're talking about a subnet mask, it's really how many ones you have in that address. So a subnet mask of 255.255.255.0 would just be 81.81.81.0. So if IT says, oh, we're going to give you a subnet mask of /24, They may, that may be all they tell you. Well, you can go, oh, I remember those guys talking about that. That's really just 24 ones. And then you can figure it out by that.
Yeah.
You know, just a shorthand is what
So
that is.
subnet mask allows you, let me turn this off.
Subnet mask allows you to actually take a big one network and subdivide it into smaller little networks, so that if you have one PC has a subnet mask of XYZ, whatever, another PC has a different one, they might not necessarily be able to talk to each other. And that's what subnetting does. It allows you to subdivide the network, and essentially it helps with a lot of other things related to the network. But by subdividing the network, it allows you to isolate some things, not completely until you get into VLANs, but it does help. Okay, so subnets were not this kind of subnet here, but servers may be on a different subnet than the centrals. And so when they do that, when you have servers that are on a different subnet, and you also have to have routing involved at that point. But example of, and Bruce was talking about 255.255.255.0, that would be a /21 or /24. This is actually a /21, which you may hear, because not all of them are 255. The third octet is a little different. So you'll hear about that. But when we installed centrals back in the old PIC Classic day, we didn't use VLANs. We'll talk about it in a minute. We used subnets, and for instance, what we did is central stations all were within a subnet range of 172.31.3.32 to 94 for the first network in a system. You can have more, but and what that did was that allowed us to keep track of only if you added a central station, you knew where to add it, so you don't have a possibility of having two with the same IP. You never want to do that. That would be like your address at home. Your next door neighbor have the same actual address. The mailman wouldn't know where to go. Yeah, well, obviously look at the name, but so you don't want to do that in a network. And then we might use bedsides, might be on a different version. Instead of 3 for the third octet, they might be 7. So all the bedsides automatically get an IP address, and then if you need to have, let's see, if the device needs to be added, then it's just a matter of simply adding it into the section you want, and you keep it's really good for the biomads for you guys to keep a list of everything so that you know where to add it. Okay? And troubleshooting is easier because when you've got everything grouped by IP. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Now we talked about VLANs. VLAN is a logical collection of network devices that communicate through a single private local area network. So by having VLANs, if you have multiple VLANs, and you all have probably heard the term VLANs before, have it? Most of you have heard that? Okay. And that means that you actually are segmenting whatever, if it's a central station group, in its own private VLAN. So something outside of that VLAN can't talk to any device inside that VLAN unless they are allowed to talk by a router that routes communication. So if you have a hospital you don't want to run 100 different cables for all the different things. You just run one network cable to a PAC system, and it goes to a switch, and that switch also goes to nurses' stations where they do their business on talking with EMRs or whatever, and maybe central stations. Each one has its own private LAN called a virtual local area network, and they can't see the others. It's completely isolated electronically, not physically, of course, but electronically. So VLANs are useful for that. And most new systems do incorporate VLANs. Philips does, I'm sure the GE and others, and Space Labs and all those do as well, where they incorporate VLANs, and that way you'll have the central stations on a VLAN and maybe the servers on a VLAN, and then you have a router which allows the VLANs to connect to each other and talk. Because it's, as it mentions here, VLANs are very cost effective versus having to run multiple different cables and Cat5 or Cat6 cables around. So it works really well.
Yeah, and outside of the biomed community, even in a regular business, a system administrator may want to put the HR department on a separate VLAN. So, you know, you have your payroll information, your personal information in HR, but they can just communicate. If they want to send an email or something outside of HR, then like Jim said, you'd have to go through a router, but then that can be controlled by your network administrator within IT. So they're a wonderful thing. You can use a single switch, put a bunch of different VLANs on there, and they can communicate with each other. Instead of having maybe 10 different switches, you can have a single switch with multiple VLANs. Again, it's important to know if you want the VLAN, one VLAN to be able to communicate, send data to another VLAN, you need a router, or it may just be called a layer 3 switch. So layer 3 switch, you know, the OSI model. So layer 3 is really routing, right? So.
And we've actually seen this. The reason I bring it up, Bruce brings it up, we've seen this in the real world too, where we won't be able to communicate, say a central can't communicate to the server. And I've seen this personally where it's going to the hospital network. And as Bruce mentioned, the switches themselves, each port can be in a different VLAN or the same VLAN. And what had happened was IT was in there, they were adding a connection, I don't know what, we put them into HR, you know, to port 7. And they accidentally added or changed it to port 8, which happened to be going to a central station. And then all of a sudden the central station goes into local mode and can't communicate because now the port it's plugged into, instead of being on a VLAN for the TIC-IX system, was now on a VLAN for HR or something, you know. So what we did was work with IT, and at first, of course, IT always says, we didn't do anything, you know, nothing's wrong. Y'all, does anyone ever heard him say that? Okay, I get a few responses there. Yeah, that happens all the time. We didn't do anything, but then you get the right person. Like I said earlier, there's so many different folks, because, you know, in biomed, you have people that know their comps, you have people that know the centrals, you have people that know all the different things, and you won't have, well, you could have someone in biomed knows everything, but it's certainly more efficient to have those experts in different groups. So IT is the same way. Finally, when you get the right person in IT, it says, well, you know, I did go into the switch because I needed to add in a port to for this group up on the 5th floor that's working on imaging or something, and they accidentally they didn't physically check it. And sometimes these folks are doing this remotely from another city, you know, maybe even another country, and they don't actually go there and check the port and see, oh, this wire is going to a central. They don't know that. So, but once you get the right person, this is where getting to know your IT folks, you know, can be helpful, because then you can say, well, I know there's something going on, and you'll call Joey in IT. Hey, Joey, this is Jim, and I was trying to get this central going. All of a sudden it went off. You think you could help out? And, you know, he might say, oh, yeah, let me check real quick. You know, because you know the person. It's nice when you know, have a real contact. So it's really makes a difference to know a little bit about VLAN, so you can maybe fix little problems like that. Okay. Another good command to use, IPConfig, because this lets you know everything about the configuration of the network adapter called NIC, Network Interface Connection, Network Interface Card, on that particular machine. So if you go to a central because it's not communicating, first thing you can do, well, it could ping, first thing you do is an IPConfig. If you do an IPConfig, kind of made that slide a little large there, but You can get it from a command prompt, and it will give you the DHCP and DNS settings in the config. It gives you the IP address, subnet mask, and the gateway, all that information. And you can do an IPConfig space /all, and it'll give you everything about that network card in that computer. And as it shows here, when you do that, you'll get a lot of information. It might actually tell you what's going on. It might be something simple where, and I've seen this a lot, and you guys probably have too, where you have a central that's under a desk. And anyone have that in their hospital? Okay, now some of you probably do have them where they're remoted and they're in closets, right? And that's good because they're kind of way they don't get near as dusty. But sometimes we're under a desk and you have a network cable coming out, and the nurses are under there, or they're sitting down and their feet are under there. They might kick the cable, you know, and it comes off out of the computer or from the wall. And when they do that, and you do an IPConfig, it's not going to give you the correct information. It's going to show that it's not connected, media disconnected, or something like that. And then that's your first clue. And many times, all you have to do is get a new cable and you're ready to go. And I've worked with a lot of folks who don't have to make a service call, because that's the first thing I'll ask. And in many cases, when that is the problem, I'll get the Vaal calling back. Yep, that fixed it. That's all it was. We just, the nurse broke the cable or something like that. So, anything else?
Yeah, I mean, at your hospital, sometimes IT, you're getting a new laptop, or you're having a problem with your laptop or whatever, and they want to know your host name. This has come in handy. The IPConfig /all will show you the host name. And sometimes you just want to know what that is, or you need to verify that. So
yeah, it's not this little, I don't think it is.
Default gateway, basically that's your router. What that means is, how is this device going to get out to the outside world? Is default gateway, if you want to know what that is, basically that's your router that this system would be using. So,
and you may see IPv6 address instead. That's really wrong. That's Internet Protocol version 6. We use IPv4. 6 was created because we ran out of, we ran out quite a long time ago. IP addresses, only something like 3.2 billion. Sounds like a lot, but not really when you have 100,000 in a hospital and 10,000 in their own. So what happened though is they behind firewalls and such, they have the ability to have non-routed IP addresses that stay just within that hospital. And because of that, ordinarily would have had to have gone IPv6 because it would have run out, but now they have the ability to have internal addresses that don't get out on the internet. So they can do whatever they want inside behind the router. And that way, we don't have to worry as much. You'll still see eventually the IPv6 will be normal, but it may be years. Okay. Configure a network card. You can go, if in many cases for centrals, they don't have obtain IP address automatically. They want it to be hard-coded because you don't really want to have automatic IP address for a central station. It's one thing for a bedside monitor, but for a central station, you want it to be hard-coded because that should never change. But here you can set these devices up manually if you want, or automatically. Hospital supplied networks will have a DHCP servers. Some hospitals do have it to where if they see the MAC address of that particular PC, they'll automatically always give it a name, and that's okay, and you do see some of that. But in many cases, we still like the hard code. And a little thing up there. Okay, so we talked earlier about duplex. Bruce alluded to the fact that there's full duplex versus if you have one, say on a Cisco network, you have one device set to 100 full and one device set to auto. The Cisco will default to 100 half duplex. And the difference between half duplex and full duplex is half duplex is like a walkie-talkie. Any ham radio operators? One. Anyway, okay, so when I'm talking around the world, and I've talked all over the world on my ham radio home, I can talk but they can't talk at the same time, just like a walkie-talkie, okay? And everyone here probably uses walkie-talkies. You can talk, but when you're talking, the other person can't talk. So half duplex allows one side to talk at one time, which means it's not as efficient as full duplex, which half duplex can transmit on one side or the other. Full duplex is just like a telephone, where everybody can talk. You know, if you're talking to a friend, you can both talk, even though you won't obviously be able to both listen to everything at the same time, but you can talk and you can hear each other at the same time. And that's full duplex. So when you have a full duplex connection, the device can talk and listen simultaneously. And as you can imagine, the speed at which it's able to respond and do what it needs to is a lot faster, because now you can talk and listen instead of talking, wait, talking, wait, talking, wait. That sort of thing. Okay. So today, the data traversing the nurses stations is within the capability, or yesterday, most megabit device, 100 megabit. I got a little spam thing up here. It's kind of the wrong spot. But the amount of data going through a network is a lot higher. We've added a lot more devices. It used to be, you know, you'd have just a handful of devices, and it wasn't any big deal early on, because there just wasn't that much sending and receiving data, even with wireless networks. Now everything has a, you know, it's on a wireless network. There's lots of things in your home you don't think about. You got your Nest thermostat, or you have your Ring doorbell and all this other stuff. Or a thermometer that's on the internet now, or on your home network. And so you've got a lot more to use to. And so instead of there just being a small town with a few buildings and a couple of streets, now you've got a huge town with many more people, cars, hundreds of stoplights, parking lots, and everyone's a rush now. Spam is rampant. You get it every day, although you can get it at the grocery too, which is what this comes in.
Yeah.
And so our next slide is going to show you the difference between, you can't really see it because it's kind of hard to see, but 100 megabit bandwidth was sufficient in the old days. And Pick Classic, for those of you that had or have Pick Classic, 100 megabit was fine. You could do everything you needed to do. There just wasn't near as much data. But now, with all the newer versions of all the data flowing for EMRs, and some people hook up vents that automatically go through the central stations into the EMR. There's a lot more data, and now you need a gigabit network. And here is what you see. I don't know if you want to point that out, Bruce. On
Yeah, I know it's hard to see in the middle and in the back, but on the left side, these are real life hospital networks that I scan using a program called SolarWinds. You probably heard about SolarWinds. Your IT department may use it, but it's a really neat program. You can export these to like an Excel file and get all kinds of reports all the way down to the port level of each switch. But like Jim said, this is an older system. I know you can't really see that, but it's blue.
showing blue lines here.
Is 100 megabit speed between those connections. This is a newer network. I know you can't see it, but it's pink, which tells me there's a little chart down here, but that is a gigabit. It's a more modern network. So if you like to have this for the systems you support, go to your vendor and say, hey, do you have like a network, you know, a printout or a scan of your network? And it helps you picture what, you know, maybe where your routers are and the speed, and maybe you're missing a switch. We've seen that before. But just go ask the vendor if they can supply that to you, and if they can, ask them why they can't. So
now,
it's just good to know.
Existing network that, say, the older version like Pick Classic, there's no reason really to upgrade it to gigabit. It'll work just fine. But if you adding on new devices or switching it over to say the newer systems, and in fact, and Bruce used to do this, was he would quote, one of the things he did was to go into hospitals to see what's needed to upgrade. And he could tell when you're going to a newer system, you have to go gigabit. And so it requires new switches.
Yeah, go back to that, Jim, because it really, as a biomed, if you get something like this from the vendor, or if you scan it yourself, and let's say this department is ER, they're having some intermittent problems in ER, nobody really knows why, but maybe, and I've seen this, maybe that connection just to the ER is running at a slower speed than it should. Let's say it's running at 100 megabits where it should be running a gig. For whatever reason, it was installed incorrectly or something went wrong. Just looking at that and go, oh, that's part of the problem right there. That ER closet, we got something going on in there. So just an idea to help you.
SolarWinds is really good about finding little things like that. The only caveat with SolarWinds is it's real expensive. So it's not like everyone in here can go, it's like $1,000 a copy. So unfortunately, it's kind of cost prohibitive, and IT departments usually do have a few versions, copies of that. So it'd be great to have one, for you guys too, so you could just kind of, but yeah, kind of expensive.
There's other programs out there too, Cisco, that do the same thing. So
the bottom line here is work together with IT, kind of help reduce the sleepless nights when you have to go there and work on something in the middle of the night and only to come to find out that IT was on a weekend. It's not uncommon, that they do upgrades of switches and things on the weekend or late at night, or they're doing their cron jobs and this and that for backups and what have you late at night, and they don't bother to tell you. IT is not really used to having live patient critical data flowing on the network, and we're talking live stadium data here, instantaneous all the time. And so they're getting more used to it, but it'd be great if they say, hey, they call the biomed and say, hey, we're going to be upgrading the switch. We don't think it's going to affect this area up here in ICU, but we want you to be aware of it or something. At least you know what's going on. And if there is a problem where you hear a nurse calls you in the middle of the night and says, hey, we got our central station's offline, at least you can get with IT and say, hey, your guys are upgrading, right? Well, whatever you did just took their central down. Then they might be able to fix it without you having to go in. Close cooperation. Do it together. You can go outside and throw up all your money, and people will come by and grab it. So there you go. If you're interested more about networking, CompTIA has a networking course called Network Plus. It's a good place to go. There's also, Cisco also has many certifications, and many vendors like Philips, they require the field engineers to have at least CCNA certification, which actually it's pretty involved. Unfortunately, Cisco makes you recertify every 3 years, which I think is, I think they're doing it in their best interest, not necessarily in the interest of, because you don't really need, it's not like you're gonna, after 3 years, you're gonna forget everything you learned or do some new stuff. But there's also a place where you can learn a lot of this stuff by going, I found this called itpro.tv, and they have courses, video courses online all the time with professional network folks that give you, they're trainers to do it. And I found it, and you can actually get permanent discounts for that. I did that for a few months when I was recertifying for CCNA years ago. And you can go, there's codes, like promo codes you can get. And I think twit.tv, This Week in Tech, twit.tv, they have some promo codes, because I hear some of their podcasts, and they have like codes that they say, if you go here, you'll save 30% forever or something. So you can do that, and that's actually good, because then you can watch these videos at your own leisure. And some of the companies that do this, I know IT Pro is one, where they also have virtual machines. You can actually practice on a real server, a virtual server, and practice some of the commands. It's part of one of their, like, the premium version or something. But so those are actually pretty good. And there's some free stuff out there too.
Yeah, and if you're interested, talk to your manager. Go out to CompTIA. Good, like Jim said, a great place to get started is their Network Plus. We both kind of started with that. I started with that, and I mean, I was just scared to death with all this stuff, and went through the certifications, felt more confident. My career started growing, and you got to start somewhere. But if it interests you, look into some of this stuff. Sit down with your manager and say, hey, you know, some of these certifications are going to cost X, Y, Z amount of money, and will you help me pay for it? Will the hospital pay for it? Will they split it with me? You might be surprised. They'll probably pay for it. And if you get some certifications, get some experience, and the hospital you're at doesn't want to pay you what you think you're worth, then it's easier to move on with those certifications. So
Has anyone upgraded here, say, a phone system from the old classic to the newer where they put in new switches and things? You there? That's actually a good way to get some free switches, because usually they take out the old ones that have been there for years. Many times they either may sell them really cheap or throw them away in some cases. Well, you might be able to grab a couple of those switches and take it home and just play with it. You can do anything you want to, it won't matter. And those actually will be great for training. So if you have the opportunity to grab an old switch that's sitting on an alley with 100 other old switches, maybe I'm sure they would probably let you have it. They're not really worth much when they're 10 or 15 years old or something. And you can get equipment in a lot of commands. All the commands are pretty much the same. Okay. Well, we got a few more minutes if anyone has any questions, and we can hang around outside. They probably have another class going on here, but if anyone has any questions that they'd like to talk to us about, or you have a little problem that you'd like to get Bruce and I to bounce off some suggestions, we'll be here. We'll hang around. Okay. That's it.
that's it.
Yeah.
Thank you.